Hello, people of grace. For our Pastoral Connect this Thursday, I want to talk about the life and death of a soul. Last week's Pastoral Connect was called Gut Check, and we did an introduction to Jesus' statement about being an overcomer, being a victor, being the conqueror. Today, we're going to look at the first two of those overcoming statements that Jesus makes in his letters to the seven churches in Revelation 2 and 3. And to kick that off, I want to tell a little bit of a backstory. Many of you may know that I teach martial arts and self-defense. And on my website for my school, there is this caption that kind of summarizes my approach. Martial arts and self-defense done well leads to a more virtuous life because everybody is fighting something. Everybody is fighting something. That's really kind of the idea behind Overcomer. Winner, conquerors, you're in this life or death struggle and you have to win. And Jesus' first two promises to his followers, the first one given to the church at Ephesus and the second one given to the church at Smyrna, really speak to this life and death battle for the human soul. And his first one said to Ephesus is, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who conquers, to the one who overcomes, I will grant access to the tree of life. I will grant to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God." That's our first big goal. And everybody's fighting something. Everybody is fighting a battle for our soul, for our well-being. And our first goal is to gain access to this tree of life. In the Bible, our access to the tree of life was lost in the Garden of Eden, and our bodies began to wear out and die when we lost access to the tree of life. You don't see the tree of life again until that picture of the New Jerusalem. And my little picture on the Pastoral Connect here today is one artist rendering of the tree of life. So when we get access to the tree of life again, we've overcome death, and our bodies will never die again because that tree regenerates our bodies. So we're fighting to win a battle for our soul so that we can gain access to the tree of life and kind of this embodied blessing. And the great challenge for a saint in this life is to live that kind of abundant, embodied blessing in a world that's still under the curse, under the law, in this spiritual battle against principalities and powers. And so we're outwardly wasting away, as Paul says, but to be inwardly renewed day by day, because we know we're ultimately going to get access to that tree of life, and we have God's Spirit in us. So we need to be fighting for that. And Jesus makes a promise to those who are truly followers of him that we will overcome. And so we want to be living more and more in that kind of hope and having that become more and more internalized and embodied. As John said, he who has this hope in him purifies himself, even as Christ is pure. So we just get this desire to live more and more that abundant and pure life from within, not from guilt, not from shame, not from some type of tormenting fear, but just access to the tree of life. Well, to really be gaining access to that tree of life and knowing we will ultimately truly get access to it, there's something we have to avoid. We have to avoid what Jesus calls this second death. To the church of Smyrna, Jesus says in Revelation 2:11, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death." So if we want to be gaining access to the tree of life, we have to avoid and stop fearing the second death. Well, what is the second death? Well, the first death is when your soul leaves your body, and we're not going to escape that. It's appointed all to die, once to die, and then to face the judgment. That's the first death. But that's not really God's primary concern. His primary concern is that we would avoid the second death, which is the death of a soul. It's when your soul, when yourself, when your awareness gets fixed in a state where God's presence is torment. That's the second death. The demons are already in that state where when they are exposed to the presence of Christ, that's torment for them. That is a stench of death to them. But the presence of Christ is an aroma of life to those who are being saved. And that's kind of the reality of the journey we are on, is that each and every day, every human being is becoming a soul, getting fixed in a state of awareness where the presence of Christ and of God is an aroma of life, or the presence of Christ and God is a stench of death, a second death. And Jesus says, if you are really a disciple of me and you're learning from me, you will not be hurt by the second death. You will not be harmed. You will not have this catastrophe come to your soul. Hurt, in the Hebrew way of thinking, is really this idea of evil, calamity, catastrophe. And evil is that kind of calamity or disruption or disintegration of the soul. That's death. Life, beauty, purity, it's not calamity, it's peace. It's not disruption, it's harmony. It's not disintegration of your soul and your awareness, it's an integration of your soul and awareness, being restored to the image of God in which you were originally created, in true righteousness and holiness. So every day we're facing sometimes little, sometimes big things that present a challenge to us. Are we going to respond in a way that is where we are moving toward the tree of life, toward peace, toward inner harmony, toward integration? Or are we going to respond in a way that is disintegrating, anxiety producing, disrupting, calamitous? Each and every day, we are making choices that are marking our soul one way or the other. Everybody's in a fight. Win the fight for your soul. A more virtuous life leads to the life of a soul. So fight for that life, fight for it within yourself, and then just radiate that and show that to other people. That's preaching always, even without saying a word. And people will ask for a reason for the hope that you have and the purity and the path that you're on. And that's an encouraging thought. Have a blessed